first time Arnold came to America, I took Louis backstage, and when Arnold went by us, I'll never forget, I looked at Louis' face, and he just looked at Arnold with awe. I thought God just passed us.
Mr. Olympia 7 times, Mr. Universe 5 times. Folks, would you please welcome Arnold Schwarzenegger.
When the conversation turns to the greatest bodybuilders of all time, the name Arnold Schwarzenegger rises above the rest. But beyond the trophies and fame lies a man whose legacy is as controversial as it is legendary. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches with a physique that redefined muscularity, Arnold didn't just win 7 Mr. Olympia titles, he changed the sport forever. He wasn't just a competitor, he became the face of bodybuilding itself, a larger-than-life figure who transformed a niche sport into a global phenomenon. But Arnold's rise to the top wasn't just about brute strength or perfect symmetry. It was about mind games and strategy. Behind the dazzling charm and his iconic victories was a man who manipulated the sport, the media, and even his own peers. This is the story of a young man from Austria who rose to conquer the bodybuilding world, only to become one of its most divisive figures. A champion to some, a villain to others. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger like you've never seen him before. Born on July 30, 1947, in the small Austrian village of Thal, Arnold Schwarzenegger grew up in a household ruled by discipline, hardship, and an unrelenting desire to escape.
Growing up after the Second World War in 1947, I was born, and to grow up with no food and starvation and famine, and my mother going around what they call hamstering, which means begging at various different farmers for food, so she had food for the children.
And I had a very tough father that was sometimes physical and smacked us around, and so I wanted to escape from that home.
His father, Gustav, a former Nazi party member and the village's police chief, was a strict authoritarian, a heavy drinker. Gustav demanded absolute obedience, often enforcing it through harsh beatings, an upbringing all too common in post-war Austria.
My father was a very complicated guy. He was a victim of the Second World War, meaning that he was dragged into the war, became a soldier, a Nazi officer. He was buried under rubble of buildings that collapsed on top of him for 3 days, and then he had back surgeries, and then he was shipped back home. So he was suffering from malaria, he was suffering from shrapnels moving around in his body. He was depressed, obviously, that they lost the war in the first place, so that must have had an impact on all these men, because everyone around me when I grew up was kind of drinking. And so people only drink when they're really unhappy. So there was a lot of drinking going on, a lot of violence going on, hitting the kids.
But young Arnold was different. He wasn't going to be just another small-town boy following orders. He wanted more. By his early teens, that hunger turned into action. Waking up at 6 a.m. every morning, Arnold would fetch milk from a nearby farm before beginning intense physical training under his father's watchful eye. A former curling champion, Gustav believed in discipline through sports, and he expected his sons to maintain rigorous physical conditioning.
Heard somewhere you mentioned your father made you earn your breakfast. And I was thinking, what does that feel like?
We had to earn breakfast, like you said. We had to do push-ups and sit-ups and compete, knee bends and all this stuff, running around the house in order to be allowed to have breakfast.
Academically, Arnold was an average student, but he stood out in one critical way: his relentless work ethic. His father wanted him to become a police officer. His mother hoped he'd attend business school, but Arnold had other plans that neither of them could have ever imagined. One day, he caught a glimpse of a bodybuilder on television. That moment changed everything.
Reg Park, I saw him in Hercules movies. So can you believe that this guy won Mr. Universe 3 times, and then he was discovered in Rome, in Cinecittà. And they saw him there and they said, oh my God, you are Hercules.
Hercules, yeah.
We're going to send you to acting classes and you're going to play Hercules. And then Steve Reeves did the same thing, who was another Mr. Universe from 1950. So both of them became Hercules. But I mean, I said to myself, if Reg Park could get into movies, maybe when I go to America and I become the world's greatest bodybuilder, then they would ask me to go into movies.
Right then and there, Arnold knew he was going to be the greatest bodybuilder in the world, and beyond that, a global superstar. In 1950s Austria, bodybuilding was a joke. Those who lifted weights were mocked and dismissed as foolish. But Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't care. He had no interest in fitting in. He was chasing something bigger. At 15 years old, a simple decision would alter the course of his life forever. His soccer coach introduced him to weightlifting. And from the moment he stepped into the gym, Arnold was hooked. The iron called to him, and he answered with an obsession that would redefine not just his life, but the entire sport of bodybuilding. Arnold faced many struggles in finding the best training methods and exercises.
When I went to the gym, all of a sudden the guys were saying, I can't believe this, you've been here for 3 months and you're bench pressing already 185 pounds. You know something? You have unbelievable talent, and look at your biceps, they're popping out already, and your calves. You know, we should put you on a weightlifting club and then a weightlifting team, and you should become one of our lifters. And then all of a sudden, with the age of 16, I was already competing in weightlifting, and they took me from village to village.
Within just 2 years, his relentless training transformed him. He wasn't just improving, he was dominating. But while Arnold was laser focused on his future, his parents were terrified.
And my mother finally went to our house doctor, and she said, you got to help him because there's something wrong with my son. My son has pictures right above the wall there where he sleeps. The whole wall is covered with male bodies that are oiled up with little tiny trunks on. What is going wrong here with my son? And you know, finally the doctor, when he talked to me, he then calmed her down afterwards and says, look, I talked to your son. Your son is motivated. He takes this seriously. And he finally calmed her down that she got off my back, because, I mean, she was like bothering me with all this stuff.
In 1965, Arnold's dreams of bodybuilding glory hit a major roadblock. He was conscripted into the Austrian army for mandatory military service. Assigned as a tank driver, his days were filled with grueling drills and strict discipline. But then, an opportunity arose that he couldn't ignore. Arnold received an invitation to compete in the Mr. Europe Junior Bodybuilding competition in Germany. There was just one problem. The military refused to let him leave the base. For most soldiers, that would have been the end of the story. But Arnold wasn't like most soldiers. One night, driven by pure ambition, he scaled the barracks wall, crawled under a fence, and vanished into the night, armed with nothing but the clothes on his back and just enough money to reach Germany. Arnold arrived at the competition with no gear, no plan, just sheer determination. But once he stepped on stage, none of that mattered. His physique was extraordinary for his age, razor-sharp definition, near-perfect symmetry, and a commanding presence. After an intense round of posing, he was crowned Mr. Europe Junior, his first major victory. After completing his military service, Arnold's career was about to explode. He landed a job at a gym in Munich, Germany, giving him exactly what he needed: time to train, time to grow, and time to dominate.
The man that actually discovered Arnold was a man by the name of Albert Busek. Now, Albert Busek first discovered Arnold Schwarzenegger back in 1965 at one of Arnold's very first competitions called the Best Built Man in Europe. Albert convinced Arnold to come work for him at his gym in Munich, Germany. And Munich was obviously a very big city at the time, so that was kind of Arnold's first step into moving into a bigger spotlight in a sense.
In 1966, Arnold took on the Mr. Europe competition, this time in the senior division, facing off against the most elite bodybuilders in Europe. At just 19 years old, he didn't just win, he annihilated the competition. With arms measuring over 20 inches, his physique left the crowd in shock. Even the judges were in awe, so much so that they offered to pay for his trip to London to compete in the prestigious Mr. Universe competition. But then, Arnold made a costly mistake. Just a week after his Mr. Europe victory, he entered another competition, the Strongest Man in Europe. This event, run by a rival organization, changed everything. By competing, Arnold lost the support of the Mr. Europe judges, along with their financial backing for Mr. Universe. Suddenly, the golden opportunity he had been handed was ripped away. Now, he had to find his own way to London. After weeks of scraping together every penny, Arnold finally arrived at the 1966 Mr. Universe competition.
Then all of a sudden I won the Junior Mr. Europe, and then I won the Mr. Europe, and then second Mr. Universe. So by that time, now I was 19 years old. I had over 20-inch arms. Everyone in London, when I arrived at the Mr. Universe contest, and I was 19 years old, they were standing outside the hotel and saying, "Oh, here he is. This is the guy."
At 6 feet 1 inch and 236 pounds, he was an imposing force on stage, but not enough. He placed second behind Chester Yorton. The loss crushed him. Arnold expected to win. Instead of sulking, Arnold did what champions do. He got back to work. He returned to Munich angrier and more determined than ever.
I was so hungry, so therefore every magazine that I could get a hold of, I bought. And then I had this whole library of magazines at home, old ones, newer ones, and old books on physical culture. And I read all this stuff and studied it carefully. And then I used my body kind of like as an experiment, because I would do a certain exercise, 40 reps, 40 times. So to know where will I be sore the next day, and then I would write it down, because I wouldn't believe just what the magazine says, because everyone needs a different training. So I followed Reg Park's training, who was the Mr. Universe 3 times. So I followed his routine, but I wanted to know exactly what works for me. So slowly but surely, I dissected the body kind of, and I figured out all of the exercises that I needed to do in order to be the best.
Arnold wasn't going to let this loss define him. He would return stronger than ever and claim the Mr. Universe title.
Bodybuilders of 20 countries brought their knotty problems to London to face the judges in the Mr. Universe contest.
On September 23, 1967, at just 20 years old, Arnold Schwarzenegger made history, becoming the youngest Mr. Universe champion ever. A year later, he returned to the competition bigger, stronger, and more dominant than ever, claiming victory in the professional division of Mr. Universe. Little did he know that this moment would change his life forever. Shortly after his second Mr. Universe win, Arnold received a phone call that would reshape his future. On the line was Joe Weider, a legendary bodybuilding coach, publisher of Muscle Builder magazine, and the most powerful man in the sport. Weider had seen Arnold's potential and wanted to bring him to America. He invited Arnold to compete in the IFBB Mr. Universe competition in Miami and offered him a chance to train and work in California. Arnold was stunned. This was the dream he had envisioned since he was a boy in Austria. Without hesitation, he said yes. In September 1968, at just 21 years old, Arnold landed in America. He arrived with nothing but a gym bag, $20 in his pocket, and an unstoppable dream. He didn't speak a word of English, but that didn't matter. Settling into a small apartment in Venice Beach, Arnold began making a modest income from photos published in Joe Weider's magazines. But more importantly, he stepped into the legendary Gold's Gym in Los Angeles, the mecca of bodybuilding. It didn't take long for him to establish himself as the most dominant figure in the gym. After all, he was the future of bodybuilding. Arnold had arrived, and this was only the beginning. Arnold's first attempt at the American version of Mr. Universe, however, ended in disaster. He was bested by the legendary Frank Zane, a reigning icon in the bodybuilding world at the time.
I was absolutely convinced that I'm going to beat all the American bodybuilders, set me up as kind of like the new champion,
Become the greatest bodybuilder of all times.
He's acting so arrogant and cocky like the winner, but he wasn't in shape, because it was all about being big and, size with him.
When they announced the 4th place, 3rd place, and the 2nd place, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I once was considered like the unbeatable guy, and now all of a sudden Frank Zane won.
I think he was just used to winning all the time. Landing in this country the first time, getting defeated by, as his words, a chicken with 17-inch arms. And my reply to that is, at least this chicken was very muscular and you weren't.
I was so devastated. I was lying there in the middle of the night in bed in this hotel room, and I thought the world is coming to an end.
Weeder had just moved to California too, and he wasn't offering scholarships for anybody except Arnold.
So he only offered a contract to Arnold, even though he lost the universe to you.
Yeah. I remember standing on stage, and he's holding my hand up as the winner, and he said, "Well, Frank, what do you think about Arnold? Isn't he great what potential he has? I'm going to fly him to California and build him up and make him into a real champion." I said, "Hey, Joe, I just beat him for Mr. Universe. What about me?"
Never one to shy away from challenges, Arnold set his sights on the 1969 Mr. Olympia contest. The 1969 Mr. Olympia was the 5th annual event of a contest that was announced by Muscle Builder magazine as the most prestigious contest in the world. The Weider organization was proudly touting the relatively new competition as the best of the best. In 1969, the annual event was held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York. 1 year earlier, the reigning Mr. Olympia, Sergio Oliva, was disappointed to discover that no other competitors had dared to show up in New York to challenge him for the title. In 1969, however, the scenario was undoubtedly different. A new bodybuilding superstar was on the horizon and ready to challenge Oliva for the title. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the young and cocky bodybuilding phenomenon, was plastered all over the Weider magazines during the last 12 months and promoted as the future of bodybuilding. The crowd of bodybuilding fans was looking forward to the clash of the titans. Sergio had his biggest fan base packed into the Brooklyn Academy of Music that night. However, the crowd was also anxiously anticipating the arrival of Schwarzenegger on stage. Featured extensively in Muscle Builder and Mr. America magazines for the last year, Arnold had the hype and the momentum behind him. Weider was pushing for Arnold to take Sergio down and become the new Mr. Olympia. The Mr. Olympia only featured 2 competitors in 1969, Sergio Oliva and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sergio stepped on stage first. His freakish proportions put his head and shoulders above the competition. The New York audience shouted encouragement to their hero as Sergio went through his posing routine, displaying the best physique on the planet. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped on stage next to a resounding ovation. However, this was not the same bulky and pale bodybuilder that had lost the title to someone 50 pounds lighter than him 1 year earlier. The new version of Arnold was impressive, having spent the last 12 months training and refining his massive physique. Now, he was at least 15 pounds lighter, displaying a hard, ripped, and tan physique that was the closest thing to unbeatable that night. When Sergio and Arnold were brought out together on stage, the judges asked the 2 competitors to hit their best poses so they could decide a winner in such a close contest. Sergio hit a frightening most muscular pose, while Arnold glided into a magnificent 3-quarterback pose. After several non-stop minutes of intense posing, the judges reconvened backstage to try to pick a winner. After taking a poll of all the judges, it was decided by a narrow 1-point vote that Sergio Oliva would be crowned Mr. Olympia for the 3rd year in a row. Although Arnold's face registered obvious disappointment, he quickly regained his composure and wrapped his massive arms around Sergio's shoulders and gave him a kiss on the cheek. However, there was no doubt in Arnold's mind that he would be back in 1970 to take the title and be recognized as the greatest bodybuilder in the world. The 1970 IFBB Mr. Olympia, Mr. America, and Mr. World contest were held on October 3, 1970 at Town Hall in New York City. The crowd was screaming for both Sergio and Arnold to come on stage. This was the true battle of the giants, the myth versus the Austrian oak. Reg Lewis, 1963 IFBB Mr. America, also decided to enter the Mr. Olympia that year. Reg displayed the more symmetrical and polished physique that was popular a decade earlier. While Reg was posing in front of the sold-out auditorium at Town Hall, the real contest was taking place in the warm-up room. Sergio and Arnold got into a heated argument on who would pose last. Sergio taunted Arnold, telling him that he was a nobody while Sergio was still the reigning Mr. Olympia. Interestingly, Arnold had defeated Sergio just 2 weeks earlier at the AAU Mr. World contest in Columbus, Ohio. Despite this, Arnold dropped the argument and allowed Sergio to pose last.
Sergio was big, but he was too smooth, but he was really big. Arnold was really at his best that year compared to 69. He was bigger, he was more cut. And then he had just beaten Sergio in Columbus, Ohio, like 2 weeks earlier. The story was that he told Sergio, they all went out to dinner afterwards, and Sergio was shocked that Arnold beat him because he had beaten him the year before. So then Sergio said, "I can't believe you beat me, Arnold." And Arnold said, "Sergio, if you would have been just a little bigger, I wouldn't be able to touch you." So then Sergio goes home to Chicago and eats for the next 2 weeks and gets bigger, but he gets fatter.
When Arnold stepped on stage, the improvements from a year ago were immediately evident. Arnold was bigger than last year, but still in great shape with detailed definition and separation. His posing was superb, with each pose perfectly executed. His routine was strong and powerful, with such iconic poses as his front double biceps, side chest, and 3-quarterback pose, all looking spectacular. When Arnold left the stage, even the most fierce Oliva supporters were cheering for him. Sergio took his time stepping on stage. As the reigning king of bodybuilding, Sergio milked the audience for all the applause he could before finally making his entrance. Bigger than ever before, it was clearly evident that Sergio had sacrificed quality for quantity. He was still displaying his magnificent shape with his tiny waist offset by his huge chest and arms and his massive thighs. However, the magnificence of Oliva's physique was overshadowed by excess fat and oil. The sharp details and hard lines that had made Sergio a physical phenomenon from 1967 to 1969 were no longer present. The crowd still greeted Sergio with thunderous applause. They jumped out of their chairs when Oliva raised those incredible arms for a front double biceps. And again when he ended his routine with the myth pose, a shot that no other bodybuilder could copy. Sergio raised his arms straight overhead, drawing attention to his incredible V-shape, tiny waist, and massive thighs. Finally, all 3 Mr. Olympia competitors were brought on stage for the final pose down. Reg Lewis stood off to the side while Arnold and Sergio battled it out for the title. Arnold hit his front double biceps pose while Sergio brought the house down with the famous Oliva Most Muscular.
Put a little trick on him. We were doing pose-off after pose-off. And then I said to him, I think it's enough. I think that they must know by now who is going to be the winner. And he says, you're right. And then he walked off. And I pointed at him like he's giving up. So it was like kind of a psychological little trick to kind of close the deal once and for all.
The trick worked. Arnold looked like the hungry champion, and Sergio appeared to be the defeated loser. The pose down eventually came to an end, and the audience waited in anticipation as the judges calculated the final scores. Finally, promoter Bud Parker approached the microphone and announced the winner of the 1970 Mr. Olympia.
One and only, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The crowd of former Oliva supporters cheered the decision as a happy Arnold stepped on stage with Joe Weider. Weider held a beautiful silver plate with a cash prize of $1,000 on top. Arnold Schwarzenegger was now the king of bodybuilding at only 23 years of age. He had done the impossible by defeating the invincible Sergio Oliva and becoming the youngest Mr. Olympia ever. In 1971, the Mr. Olympia contest was held in France, marking the first time the event took place in Europe. Since the contest began in 1965, the Mr. Olympia event had taken place in New York City. The International Federation of Bodybuilders was continuing to work hard to include a more international field of athletes in their organization. The IFBB was quickly growing thanks to the tireless leadership of IFBB President Ben Weider and his brother Joe's popular Muscle Builder and Power magazine. However, they were competing with organizations like the AAU in the United States and NABBA in Europe. Beginning in 1971, Ben Weider made a shocking announcement to all the IFBB athletes. If anyone competed in a non-sanctioned IFBB event, they would be suspended from competing in the IFBB for a full year. On September 24, 1971, the Mr. Olympia prejudging began at 2 p.m. Several contestants who arrived early to register for the contest were disheartened to learn about the new rule when entering non-sanctioned IFBB events. Due to this rule, they would not be allowed to compete this year. Among those athletes was Sergio Oliva, who had competed in the NABBA Mr. Universe contest in London just 1 week earlier, where he lost to the legendary Bill Pearl. Other notable athletes who were banned from competing in the Mr. Olympia contest in Paris included Frank Zane, Ken Waller, Roy Callender, and Franco Columbu.
Just a petty thing on the part of the IFBB. They have, over the years, shown that they're not really, the idea that they're trying to really promote bodybuilding and increase its popularity, it doesn't jive with their record. That example of not letting professionals compete because they competed in another federation, which was ridiculous. Plus, later on, there was a Chicago Pro Show where they didn't sell enough tickets, and the guy promoter had already paid the IFBB a sanction fee. I don't remember what it was, but it was pretty considerable. And so this guy, the promoter, appealed to Ben Weider for help. He says, "Could you, help us put on the show? We don't have enough money." And Ben Weider turned him down flat. And I learned of this because I ran into some of the guys who were supposed to compete, or called these other guys, and they were furious about it. They literally had the rug pulled out at the last minute. And I never forgot that. I said, what a petty thing. They could take the money from the promoters, but they won't give anything back at all. Horrible. Yeah. I'll say this publicly now. I don't care. Joe Weider's gone. I'm not aligned with any magazine. I'll say it like it is. The IFBB treated the bodybuilder like crap.
With all the other contenders banned from the contest, the only highlight of the evening was the posing routine of the reigning Mr. Olympia, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He had prepared for this contest with the intensity and dedication required for a rematch with Sergio. He never thought that he would be unopposed at the 1971 Mr. Olympia. The physique that Arnold presented to the judges and the audience in Paris was nothing but spectacular. Weighing nearly 250 pounds, Arnold was massive. His 22-inch arms and broad chest were incredible to see. Even his legs, which were once criticized, looked amazing, bigger and more defined than ever. The 1972 Mr. Olympia is considered to be the greatest and also one of the most controversial bodybuilding contests of all time. Held outside of the U.S. for only the second time since its inception, the 1972 Mr. Olympia featured a much-anticipated matchup between reigning champion Arnold Schwarzenegger and multi-Olympia winner Sergio Oliva. The showdown would take place in October at the Handelshof in Essen, Germany. The clash between bodybuilding's top two giants was, according to many, the defining matchup of 1972. However, it would have been unwise to overlook the rest of the field. One of the most impressive lineups in Golden Era history graced the stage, featuring no less than 4 current or future Mr. Olympia winners. Reigning champion Arnold Schwarzenegger, multi-time winner Sergio Oliva, future Mr. Olympia champions Frank Zane and Franco Columbu. Completing the classic lineup was the 1970 Mr. Europe winner, Serge Nubret. When the 72 Olympia lineup walked into the small warm-up room, which doubled as the pre-judging room, it became obvious the area would be too small for the 6-man lineup. Before the judging could commence, a room large enough to contain the world's best physiques would be needed. Schwarzenegger had a plan and suggested a larger room that would be good for the competition, but would also provide him with a personal advantage. Back in the Golden Era's earliest beginnings, all Olympia judging was done during the pre-judging. Posing routines and any additional comparisons would be exclusively for the benefit of the audience. As expected, Arnold and Sergio towered over the rest of the competition. To the trained eye, Sergio appeared to have a clear advantage with his superior muscle size and naturally impressive physique. Arnold, being Arnold, used his intelligence to outsmart Oliva. As Schwarzenegger later admitted, the room he had specifically requested earlier featured a black backdrop. A room with a darker backdrop would showcase his skin tone better and allow Oliva's to blend into the background. Arnold also appeared to stand closer to the front of the stage, thus conveying an illusion of greater size. The optical advantages Arnold had manipulated made a huge difference. Sergio placed second, while Arnold took his 3rd Olympia crown, much to the collective dismay of those in attendance. Bodybuilding historians and seasoned Golden Era competitors almost unanimously agree that Sergio Oliva should have won in Essen.
Again, I hate to talk about a contest that I wasn't at, but judging by the many photos I've seen and the eyewitness accounts of people that did compete, other than Franco, all of, like Frank's saying, all the other guys told me that Sergio was a clear winner that night. It's a shame. He should have won that Mr. Olympia.
We went to Essen, Germany to compete in my first Mr. Olympia. I mean, it was Arnold's contest in Essen, Germany. He didn't deserve it. Sergio should have won. Oh, yeah, he was in great shape. But Arnold was a month out. He was a month away. But, they gave it to him because it was in Germany.
Arnold's fellow competitors, Zane, Colombo, and Nubre would continue to carve out successful bodybuilding careers of their own, except for Oliva, who promptly retired after the event. Confident that he would win in 72, and feeling dejected following the controversial outcome, the myth quit the IFBB.
Arnold's friend, the guy who ran the German version of Muscle and Fitness, I can't remember his name.
Albert Busek?
Busek. There was rumors that he kind of handpicked the judges to ensure that Arnold would win that contest. You look at the photos of how it turned out, there's credibility to that. Even if you don't know a lot about bodybuilding, when you compare, I mean, not that Arnold looked bad, he looked great, but it just happens to be that year, Sergio was at the peak best condition ever. And Sergio at that condition was almost just about unbeatable. If Busek handpicked the judges to ensure Arnold win, well, that explains everything right there.
But Arnold admitted that he was off. He said he was a couple pounds off. He said, if I would have been a judge, I would have picked Sergio. But he said the reason why he won was he said it was European judges and the Europeans like a bigger guy. And he said, I'm bigger than Sergio because I'm taller and just way more. And he said, so I can understand why I won because they look for a certain type. But he goes, I wasn't at my best. I was a couple pounds off. And he goes, if I would have been a judge, I would have picked Sergio.
The 1973 Mr. Olympia was held on September 8, 1973, along with the IFBB Mr. America and Mr. World events. The 1973 Mr. Olympia was a historic event. This was the main competition that was featured in the book Pumping Iron, released by Simon & Schuster in 1974. Now in its 9th year, the Olympia was still struggling to grow in the number of competitors. Only overall winners of either the Mr. World or the Mr. Universe were eligible to compete in the Mr. Olympia, so it truly was an elite group. The first competitor on stage was the great Serge Nubre from France. Serge displayed a thick but extremely aesthetic physique. His tiny waist combined with his massive pecs, shoulders, and arms transformed his front poses into artistic masterpieces. Franco Colombo bounded on stage to the roar of the packed New York audience. Franco had made his mark in bodybuilding over the last 5 years since moving to America from Italy, courtesy of Joe Weider. Now it was time for the king. Arnold Schwarzenegger slowly walked on stage to the roar of the bodybuilding-crazed crowd. This was the guy they had waited hours to see. Arnold stood on stage, facing the audience, and he casually flexed his incredible calves for the benefit of the audience. Arnold had injured his knee just 1 year ago. He wanted to prove to the judges and the crowd that he had fully recovered and was better than ever. Opening up his body to an incredible front double biceps pose, the audience erupted into chaos. For the next few minutes, Arnold hit one trademark pose after another with perfect precision and grace. After his close and controversial call over Sergio in 1972, Arnold was in the best condition of his life for the 1973 Mr. Olympia. His physique was so refined and sculpted, it bordered on perfection. Arnold was big, thick, ripped, and totally aesthetic. He was the epitome of what Mr. Olympia represented in 1973, the most perfectly developed male physique. Arnold accepted his trophy on stage from his longtime girlfriend, Barbara Outland. Franco took second place, followed by Serge Nubret in third. This was Arnold Schwarzenegger's fourth consecutive Mr. Olympia, and he was now indisputably the king of bodybuilding. What made this victory even more special was that it was captured by the team of Gaines and Butler, forever immortalizing it in the iconic book, Pumping Iron. The 1974 Mr. Olympia contest was somewhat of a milestone in the history of bodybuilding's biggest competition because of the emerging media attention it began to attract. Despite the widespread prejudice and misunderstanding directed toward the bodybuilding community by the general public, Sports Illustrated magazine was intrigued. This unique subculture prompted Sports Illustrated to send one of their top writers to cover the topic in a substantial 10-page article featured in their October 14, 1974 issue. The often misunderstood sport of bodybuilding was approached with both curiosity and respect by reporter Richard W. Johnston.
Sports Illustrated sent one of their top writers out to the contest to cover it. So this was kind of the beginning of bodybuilding reaching mainstream press. And George Butler and Charles Gaines were both at the contest. Now, they had covered the 73 Olympia for their book. The book was coming out only like weeks after this contest. I think it came out in November of 74. This contest was in October of 74. This was like right on the crest of, bodybuilding reaching mainstream. It was still like kind of in the closet, I guess you could call it, where it was still a small sport, but people were in the mainstream press were starting to get wind of bodybuilding. And then, of course, when the book Pumping Iron came out, that really brought it open. A couple years after that, the movie came out, and then that brought it open more. And then eventually we get to the 80s, and now the whole fitness boom is going. But it really was starting here.
The timing couldn't have been better for the nation's leading sports magazine. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the reigning Mr. Olympia, was set to defend his title for the fifth and final time that very weekend. The event would be held in New York City at the prestigious Felt Forum in Madison Square Garden. At the peak of his career, and with his eyes set on soon conquering the world, Schwarzenegger impressed the reporter from Sports Illustrated so much that he received the distinction of being labeled the most extraordinary athlete anywhere today, as well as the most perfectly developed male in history. Johnston attended the 1974 Mr. International contest, held at the Embassy Auditorium in Los Angeles that summer. The event, promoted by both Schwarzenegger and his best friend Franco Columbu, allowed the veteran reporter to experience a bodybuilding competition in person. It also gave him the rare opportunity to see the king of the sport do his thing on the posing platform. After witnessing Arnold's performance on stage, he eloquently described it as an athletic and artistic display that communicates as much emotion as a Bobby Thompson home run or a Joe Namath bomb thrown 60 arching yards 10 seconds before the final gun. The nearly sold-out crowd at the 4,500-seat Felt Forum witnessed bodybuilding history as a perfectly sculpted Schwarzenegger easily cruised to his 5th Mr. Olympia victory, defeating his new challenger, 22-year-old Lou Ferrigno. Ferrigno, already a 2-time Mr. Universe winner, was hailed as the sport's next big thing in recent issues of Joe Weider's Muscle Builder and Power magazine. At 6 feet 5 inches and weighing 260 pounds, they expected Big Louie to give Schwarzenegger the challenge previously presented by former champ Sergio Oliva. Unfortunately, Lou had over-dieted for the 1974 Mr. Olympia and did not present the dominating mass shown by the confident Schwarzenegger. Only 6 days earlier, a ripped and massive Ferrigno had easily dominated the competition to win his 2nd consecutive Mr. Universe title in Verona, Italy. However, Arnold stepped onto the Olympia stage in the best shape of his life and at his heaviest ever, weighing a staggering 237 pounds of superbly sculpted perfection. In the end, he and Lou faced off in a pose-down before a roaring crowd of passionate bodybuilding fans. It was obvious to even a novice observer that Arnold had more muscle mass and diamond-hard quality to his physique than his younger opponent did. This was despite being 3 inches shorter and weighing 23 pounds less than the hulking Ferrigno. After years of domination in the bodybuilding world, Arnold had defeated all the top champions of the sport several times over. With 5 Mr. Universe titles and 5 Mr. Olympia victories, this was to be his final time on stage, and he wanted to end his illustrious career with a bang by competing in his best condition ever. As he stood on stage posing with his trophy alongside Joe Weider and Lou Ferrigno, Arnold was at his absolute peak. Arnold Schwarzenegger was not only Mr. Olympia, but as Sports Illustrated magazine accurately noted, the most perfectly developed human being on the planet. As Arnold and Franco exited the backstage doors of the Felt Forum at Madison Square Garden, they were immediately met by a massive crowd of passionate bodybuilding fans. They chanted Schwarzenegger's name as the 2 champions walked down the streets of New York. Onlookers must have asked themselves what was going on and why so much commotion surrounding these 2 men dressed in tracksuits carrying their gym bags. The fitness revolution was about to occur, but only this small cult following of bodybuilding fans could see it coming. It wouldn't be long before men around the world began scrutinizing their reflections with a newfound focus on pecs and abs, an ideal that seemed almost unimaginable back in 1974. Ten years ago, the Mr. Olympia began at the small Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York City. One of the first surprises in store in 1975 was a change in venue, with the contest being held in Pretoria, South Africa. This was an exciting change, proving the international reach that the IFBB had achieved in the last decade. Both the IFBB, Mr. Universe, and the prestigious Mr. Olympia contests were held the same night. However, that's not the final surprise in store for competitors and fans. The 1975 Mr. Olympia would prove to be an historical event for another reason. Director George Butler was using the 1975 Mr. Universe and Mr. Olympia competitions as the focal point of his new documentary about bodybuilding. George called his new film Pumping Iron. He decided on the same title as the best-selling book published only 1 year earlier with his partner, Charles Gaines. Little did anyone know that the movie Pumping Iron would go on to be a classic film that defined the sport of bodybuilding for decades to come. The 1975 Mr. Olympia was also historic as the biggest competition in the 10 years since it began. Maybe due to the rumor that the reigning champ, Arnold Schwarzenegger, would not compete due to his emerging film career. More competitors showed up to try their hand at winning the biggest title in bodybuilding than ever before. Continuing the new rule from the year before, the 1975 Mr. Olympia would be held in 2 weight divisions, under 200-pound class and over 200-pound class. In the under 200-pound division, a total of 6 competitors entered the class. In the over 200-pound class, 3 competitors signed up to compete. This was a big increase over the last 2 years. The highly anticipated Mr. Olympia event was about to begin, and both the judges and fans got their money's worth, witnessing world-class physiques on stage that night. In the under 200-pound division, Franco Columbu competed in the best shape of his life. In the over 200-pound class, Arnold Schwarzenegger was back to win his 6th consecutive Mr. Olympia contest. Arnold was uncontested as the king of bodybuilding. Arnold had just completed his first major movie, Stay Hungry, which he filmed in the spring of 1975. He had to bring his weight down to 210 pounds for the filming of that movie. To bring up his body weight to bodybuilding standards, he trained very hard over the summer before the Mr. Olympia contest in November.
When I weighed 245 pounds, and Bob Raferson, the director of Stay Hungry, said to me that I'm interested in having you come in for a reading and work on your acting and all this because I'm interested in having you in a movie. And then he said, but I don't want you to weigh more than 210 pounds. So I said to him, well, it's funny you come to me and you want me to be in a movie, but I'm weighing 245, 246. I say, I just won the Olympia, I say, which was 1974, and I was really at my biggest. And but he demanded that, and he says, look, it's very simple. On the day we start shooting, he says, I'm going to put you on a scale, and if you don't make the 210, you're out. What happened to me that year was very interesting because I had to drop the weight to 210, and then after I was finished with Stay Hungry, I decided that I go back into the Olympia because I actually, in my mind, retired in 1974. But because George Butler and Charles Gaines came to me and says, we're going to do Pumping Iron, not only the book that we have that was very successful, but we want to do a documentary. And we want you to be in it, and otherwise it doesn't work. We needed you to be in it. So I said, okay, good. I started training again, and I only had 3 months now.
Arnold competed at 225 pounds in the 1975 Mr. Olympia, roughly 12 pounds lighter than his weight in 1974. Arnold was still the obvious winner with his amazing physique, great muscle mass, and separation. In second place was the aesthetic and ripped physique of Serge Nubret from France. He was incredibly hard and lean, with deeply etched abs that seemed to take on a life of their own under the stage lights. Serge upset Big Lou Ferrigno for second place. Lou was competing in his second Mr. Olympia contest, but he made a mistake by competing too big. He was just not ripped enough to challenge Serge or Arnold for the title. In the overall pose down, Franco and Arnold posed down for the last time together at the 1975 Mr. Olympia. Arnold, as expected, won his 6th consecutive Mr. Olympia contest, hugging his friend Franco when he was announced the winner. Arnold then announced his retirement from competing in bodybuilding.
And I would like to announce officially that I'm retiring from bodybuilding competition. I would like to thank you all for supporting me. I would like to thank the judges. Bodybuilding has been a beautiful experience for me, and I will continue it for the rest of my life. I only stopped competing, but I'm not stopping bodybuilding. It's the greatest sport. Thank you.
Between 1975 and 1980, Arnold focused on expanding his personal brand. He appeared on talk shows, graced magazine covers, and became a regular presence in the media.
He would go on these talk shows and he would explain what bodybuilding is, and he would make it more, palatable, I guess, for the general public, where people could, I understand it more now, I get it. Where before it was thought of as this really weirdo sport, nobody would even look at it. And Arnold made it kind of cool and kind of, hip and all that. And then it became like cool to work out. And then everybody started getting into that. I remember being in high school, confident.
Is this always what you wanted to do after bodybuilding?
It wasn't clear when I was a kid what I wanted to do, but I knew that bodybuilding was a means to an end, and it would open up a lot of doors and opportunities. So
did you ever consider secretarial work?
I did, but my typing wasn't that good.
Typing wasn't good. Now you mentioned you're trying to. Did you say lose your accent or what?
No, it's just that you always have to work on it to be totally understandable out there.
Well, you don't want to lose it, though, do you?
No, it's not important to lose it. I think that some people think it's attractive. Other people think it's very sexy, which I don't blame them for saying so. I think it has a lot. I used to do bench press with over 500 pounds and squats. The kind of training that you do right now, basically, I couldn't believe the way you broke this jacket.
Thank you very much.
That was too much.
She's a lovely woman.
She's wonderful. She's the best thing that ever happened in my life.
Now, how does the rest of the Kennedy family feel about you? Not that you aren't a great guy, but I mean, how does you know what I mean?
It's the best thing that ever happened to the family.
I guess you don't have to be a muscle man to want to look like one, or look at one, especially if the muscle man is Arnold Schwarzenegger, the folk hero of the 90-pound weaklings. Arnold's appearance at a Fashion Valley bookstore drew standing room-only crowds who wanted to meet the man with the muscles.
In 1977, he published his autobiography, The Education of a Bodybuilder, which became a bestseller and made him even more famous as a fitness icon. However, Arnold's biggest success came with the release of the documentary Pumping Iron in 1977. The film introduced the world to the underground culture of bodybuilding like never before. But Pumping Iron didn't just showcase Arnold's victory, it also ignited one of the biggest controversies in bodybuilding history.
If you're looking at the movie Pumping Iron, most people didn't know Arnold retired up to 74. George Butler had to entice him out with, George wouldn't give me the amount, Jerome Gary, who was co-produced with George, he told me they offered Arnold $50,000 and I think 5% of the cut of the film to get him to compete again. So if any of the competitors knew at that time that Arnold's being paid $50,000 to compete and then Charles Gaines is going to judge the contest, a lot of them are going to say, what the hell?
The documentary famously highlights Arnold's rivalry with Lou Ferrigno, framing it as the ultimate battle between the reigning king and the hungry challenger. Lou, training in a dim, cramped Brooklyn gym under the watchful eye of his overbearing father, is cast as the underdog, while Arnold basks in the California sunshine, effortlessly joking with friends at Gold's Gym. It's a perfect narrative, the young lion versus the seasoned alpha, but it wasn't entirely true. Ferrigno later revealed that the dynamic between him and Arnold was exaggerated for dramatic effect. The tension, the pressure, and even the father-son dynamic were dialed up to create a story, not just a competition.
If you watch Raw Iron, we interviewed George Butler, the director, and he lays it out pretty well, but they didn't know exactly what the story was going to be. He was really interested in the subculture of bodybuilding, which it was a subculture in the 70s. And there was a lot of guys that were interesting. And originally, which this is something that I spent a lot of time watching this footage, it was originally, if I remember correctly, it was going to be about Frank Zane, because he was the most articulate and he was a very smart guy into health and all that stuff, like before anybody. But then through the course of all of it, somehow Arnold, was in that scene. And as soon as he started working with Arnold and filming him smartly, he realized Zane's a nice guy. We love him. But this guy right here is unbelievable. And then they crafted this rivalry between him and Lou. And Lou was the perfect foil, right? Because he was living in Brooklyn and he was kind of beaten down and in the basement. And, they made him look way darker than he was.
Arnold, of course, knew exactly how to portray the role the film required. He treated pumping iron like a stage, and on that stage, he was the villain, a charming, calculating mastermind who was always 2 steps ahead of his competitors.
I remember once when he said, I'm going to give Franco all the wrong advices because he listens to me like I'm his mother. That was right in the film. Well, when that film came out, the friendship between Franco and Arnold almost ended.
Franco is pretty smart, but Franco is a child. And when it comes to the day of the contest, I'm his father. He comes to me for advices. So it's not that hard for me to give him the wrong advices.
And then there's the infamous story Arnold tells in the film. The moment when he claims to have skipped his own father's funeral because it conflicted with his training.
And it was in a way a sad story when my father died, because my mother called me on the phone and she said, your dad died. And this was exactly 2 months before a contest. She says, do you come home to the funeral? I said, no. It's too late, he's dead, there's nothing to be done.
Then we wanted to sell the idea of how cold I am really, and how I have no emotions. For instance, now I took a story that I actually heard in France. One bodybuilder one time tell me, 4 years before, a story about how he never went home to his father's funeral. So I stole that story, and I said, I have to say that story. People will be shocked. People will be writing about it when this movie comes out, and that's how you get, of course, headlines and all those kind of things. And people will write about the movie. That's how we sell the tickets. And I said, as a matter of fact, my father died 1 year, just before competition. And my mother called me and I said, are you going to come home to the funeral? And I said, why? He's dead already. So I acted really totally cold, and people, it really worked. People were shocked about this. Some of them were appalled by this. And so, of course, since then, I've been getting those questions. Is this true? Is this not true? I mean, did your father really happen? The reality of it is that it never happened. My father never died before any competition. He died 3 months after a competition in 1972, and I saw him just shortly before he died.
The climax of the film, the 1975 Mr. Olympia competition, further fueled the controversy. Arnold's victory, his 6th consecutive win, was presented in the film as a foregone conclusion. Lou Ferrigno, though young and inexperienced, was portrayed as the ultimate threat to Arnold.
As time went on, and I saw that Lou Ferrigno could not be what was in the original intention to make him the villain. He was a big guy, but he did not have the kind of a presence that would make him look like an evil guy that wants there to come and destroy me. So slowly we changed the whole thing and actually made him the victim, and made me the guy that pulls the tricks on him and that wipes out the competition year after year. And there was no reason to do a psych-out job on him, because I felt 100% that I'm going to win the competition, because he was just not there at this level yet of competing. He was not ready yet to win the competition, so therefore there was no reason to psych him out. But we wanted to play it that he's really dangerous. He could wipe me out. He's huge. He's gigantic.
After Pumping Iron was released and insiders began discussing the event, it became clear that Arnold's greatest rival had been none other than Serge Nubret.
This contest, I was in very, very good shape 12 days before. And when they saw me, the day after, they told me, you cannot compete. They did not tell me why. So I stopped training. I stopped dieting for 12 days. I lost 12 pounds. And then the day before the prejudging, they told me, okay, Serge, you can compete.
Ben's rendition is that he told Serge a couple weeks ago he can't compete because he was involved in these films. Ben's rendition doesn't make any sense. Now, the other side, Serge Nubret's side, and there's another person I spoke to who wanted to remain anonymous. Serge told them that Ben approached Serge and asked him to drop out, because if he dropped out, he would make sure he got all the fairness and all the promotion for next year's Olympia. In fact, it almost guaranteed him a win.
If you looked that good 12 days before, why did you change anything? Why lose 12 pounds?
No, because I was so annoyed about what they said, you know. You know, when you have been training for 3 months for the contest and you come to the country that tell you cannot compete, I stopped eating, I stopped training, I could not eat for 12 days. And I never went to the gym. I went to the gym only the first day when I arrived in South Africa. I never went to the gym again. The day of the contest, Arnold was better than me. But 12 days before, no way. I was 212 and Arnold was 220. I was ripped. And you know, after 12 days not dieting and not training, how many muscle you lost, right? So when I went to the contest, I was 200 pounds, so Arnold beat me. But 12 days before, no way. He could not beat me.
Serge, so let me ask you this. You would go on to take second place to Arnold. Allegedly, as the story goes, you wouldn't sign the release for them to use more footage of you in pumping iron. Is that true?
Yeah. They come to Paris to shoot me, to show me how I train. They come to the gym. My wife was waiting, my daughter, Karine, and then everything was perfect. Okay? So they shoot everything. And, you know, before that, I did about 15 movies before, big screen movie. And then they wrote me a letter to say, okay, Mr. Nubre, your part is very good, you know. We don't have a lot of money. We can give you $200, okay? If they would tell me, we don't have money, we cannot pay you, you know, that won't be an insult. That would be, say, okay, no problem, okay? But offer me $200, that was really an insult for me. And I said, no, I don't want that. This is why they cut all the thing about me. And they said, the last entry Serge Nubre, but they come to Paris 1 month before to film me. So they knew I was going to compete.
Even beyond the competitions, pumping iron blurred the line between documentary and performance. Director George Butler later admitted to employing several controversial tactics, such as staging scenes and even eliminating competitors to make the film more engaging. The most shocking being his request to remove Danny Padilla from the Mr. Universe competition just 1 day before the show.
Did they film you a lot of golds also with the cameras? The pumping iron?
Yeah, we were all there. I was filmed a lot, but I got taken out a lot because it was an embarrassment to the IFBB.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
I was stupid. I should have sued. I would never have to work again.
Yeah. Right.
What they did was the morning of the show, I was told you're not competing. The morning of the show. I was eating breakfast, getting ready to get on a bus. And they said, well, you know, you're not going to compete. I said, what do you mean I'm not going to compete? I'm on the team.
Yeah.
And nobody would explain it to me. So I went to Oscar State. And I come to find out later that it was Butler who said, why don't you let the little guy stay out and we can have Ken Waller and Mike Katz in the back fighting for the position. Pumping Iron did that.
Wow.
But perhaps the most outrageous part of Arnold's character was revealed in a recent interview with legendary bodybuilder Robbie Robinson. According to Robbie, the incident took place in one of the famous outtakes from the Pumping Iron documentary, which was filmed at Arnold's house.
All came down in San Jose when we was after the competition was over and everybody was having a big party and everything. We was all in there dancing and I'm a black guy. You know, you're not dancing with no white women. Nobody could even think that would even be possible. And then they was filming all of this, and then the process of Arnold comes in the room, down with the blacks. And he kept blacking this and black. I started looking around. I'm the only black in the room. So I just walked out, went to my hotel room, went to sleep.
Wow.
And I remember hearing Joe Weider say, Arnold, stop that. Stop that. And as he was saying it, I was already walking out of the room.
Arnold made his acting debut in 1970 with the film Hercules in New York. However, due to his thick Austrian accent and long, unfamiliar name, he was credited as Arnold Strong. At the time, Hollywood producers were hesitant to cast him because of his accent and difficult-to-pronounce surname. But Arnold's goals were crystal clear. He wanted to become the highest-paid actor in the world. In 1974, Arnold had begun taking acting lessons and threw himself passionately into this new pursuit. His hard work paid off when he landed a role in the film Stay Hungry, which earned him a Golden Globe for Best New Actor. For a kid from a small Austrian village, it was an incredible achievement. By 1980, Arnold Schwarzenegger had been retired from competitive bodybuilding for 5 years and was focused on his growing movie career. Everyone believed he had moved on from bodybuilding, or so it seemed. However, at that year's Mr. Olympia, Arnold shocked fans and competitors by announcing his comeback just 1 day before the contest, and at that moment marked the beginning of the most controversial competition in bodybuilding history. The reactions were mixed. Competitor Mike Mincer was furious, while other athletes like Frank Zane and Boyer Coe expressed pity that Arnold was going to return, lose, and tarnish his legacy. On the night of the show, many were shocked of Arnold's conditioning. The Austrian oak failed to compare to a new generation of stars. His physique, while still impressive, lacked the sharpness and definition. His midsection appeared softer than usual, and his legs were extremely underdeveloped.
Did you know that Arnold was getting ready for that show, or was that just a big surprise to everybody on the day of the contest?
I knew it, but I wasn't threatened by it because and especially when I saw him, he was nervous.
Yeah.
Had a lot to lose.
And I was around Arnold when he was doing his prep at World Gym. I saw him daily and I was really, wow, Arnold was really coming in strong. He was looking he looked better 1 month before the show. I saw him and I'm like, oh wow.
Wait, so he knew he was doing a show a month, because from what I read in the articles, he decided to do a show like the 2 days before.
He didn't announce it, but I knew that. And I looked at him, I said, wow, there's no way he wants to look this good. There must be a reason too. So that was his reason.
The climax of the show began at that year's press conference, where Arnold belittled competitors, disrupted discussions about the rules, and attempted to shift the spotlight onto himself. 15 of the 16 athletes had signed a petition to abolish the 2 weight classes and have the Olympia contested as a single open class. However, the one athlete who disagreed was Arnold.
Then the issue of the weight classes came up, and there was a lot of arguing going on between Arnold and a few of the guys. I wasn't even concerned about that. I didn't care one way or the other. I thought I could win. It was a very large room. There must have been maybe 50 or 60 people in there, and Arnold, as usual, wanted to be the center of attention. So he had said something to denigrate Amir Badu in front of everyone, something that was uncalled for. He was making a fool out of himself, but at that time I wasn't concerned. I thought if Amir Badu wanted to defend himself, that was his business. So he was going through his annex. At one point, Boyer Coe stood up as a gentleman and said, look, why don't we just let Arnold explain to all of us right here, right now, what his reasons are for wanting to have weight classes. Maybe we can get to the bottom of this instead of arguing aimlessly. And he did say it in a very gentlemanly fashion. There was no hint of malice or anything negative in his voice. And Arnold snapped back, oh Boyer, why don't you stop acting like a baby, grow up and be a man, which I thought was uncalled for. So I said, look, Boyer Coe said that as a gentleman, something to that effect. He doesn't deserve that. And that pissed him off. He turned around very rapidly to face me, and he literally had his upper lip was furled around he was snarling like an animal. He said, oh, come on, Mentor, we all know that you lost last year because of your big belly. I allowed that to irritate me perhaps too much, and on impulse, I ran over towards him. I was surprised. Arnold Schwarzenegger sat down. I scared him. He went over and sat in the corner, and when he went to sit down, I continued at him. I was wagging my finger at him.
There was always tension between Mike and Arnold. There was tension between those two, always. Because Mike would say, you don't need to train 6 days a week, twice a day like Arnold does. You only need to train 2 or 3 times a week. So Arnold's methodology was being challenged in print in the magazines. Arnold didn't like that. Arnold doesn't like to lose. Arnold doesn't like being criticized.
The following day at the Mr. Olympia contest in Sydney, Australia, Arnold lined up against Zane, Mincer, and the other stars of the day. What he lacked in muscularity and leanness, he made up for with charisma. Arnold told jokes to competitors on stage to break their concentration, and then jumped out of line to strike poses.
Arnold was, he was on stage, he was supposed to be doing compulsory poses, and he wasn't. He was doing whatever he felt like. And the judge, the guy's name was Dennis Stallard, I remember. He told him, he says, Arnold, do the compulsory poses that we call for. And Arnold ignored him, just kept doing whatever he wanted. He told him again, and then finally he told him the third time, he says, Arnold, you're disqualified, get off the stage. Arnold didn't leave the stage, but that night, Dennis Stallard was disqualified as a judge and flew back to England.
But of course, my experience was back then in 1980. I saw that Arnold was the IFBB as he wanted to be, and that particular day in Sydney, Australia, the day of the Olympia, he was the IFBB. I had been given to believe prior to that Ben Weider was the president of the IFBB, and beyond that, he prided himself on being a stern, strong president. But on that particular day in 1980, he took a distant backseat to Arnold. Arnold seemed to be running things. He could have it any way he wanted.
The crowd at the Sydney Opera House showed their approval for the Austrian oak. Although few expected him to win, the sight of seeing Arnold back on stage prompted warm applause and cheering. The surprises continued as the judges ranked the competitors. The two finalists were Chris Dickerson and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Meanwhile, reigning champion Frank Zane favored challenger Mike Mincer and Boyer Coe, who displayed exceptional conditioning, all failed to impress. As the two men went through their poses, many believed that Dickerson would take the title. He was leaner, more muscular, and presented a superior overall physique. Arnold, on the other hand, tried to hide flaws through clever posing and rely on his stage presence to win the day. At the end of the night, Arnold, who many believed didn't even deserve a top 5 finish, ended up winning the show. The judges awarded Arnold 300 points to Dickerson's 292. The decision outraged the crowd, competitors, and even IFBB founder Ben Weider.
That particular contest was so clearly fixed that every other competitor and many of the fans in the audience raised a fuss. And of course, in the aftermath, all the magazines carried articles pertaining to the fact that it was fixed. It was very clear.
In bodybuilding and fitness magazines, Arnold's victory was instantly criticized. Iron Man magazine had to edit testimonies from fans to remove all the explicit language used to describe the decision. In public and private, Ben Weider claimed Dickerson had been robbed of the title. Even Arnold kept relatively quiet. There were larger ramifications at play too. In 1979, CBS agreed to broadcast 3 Mr. Olympia contests beginning in 1980. When the CBS film crew returned to the United States, they refused to produce the recordings because, in their view, the contest had been rigged in Arnold's favor.
CBS television was there to film the show, and then that footage was never used. And you did get to see that footage, though, didn't you?
This is what happened. Prior to the Mr. Olympia, CBS sent a film crew and spent 2 days with who they assumed might be the top competitors. And then that same film crew went over to Sydney to film the contest. The guy that was there, he called me in Sydney after the contest and he says, I'd like to have a meeting with you and Frank and Dennis and a couple of other people. He said, we're never going to be able to show this on TV. He said, it's just too controversial. It was obvious to him that Arnold didn't deserve to win, and they didn't want to put something so controversial, even to the average person sitting in the audience to realize, hey, something's wrong here. This is not right. So Sherm Egan, that was the guy's name. He was the guy that was producing the thing for CBS. So somehow or another, he calls me later that year because I'm in New York. And he says, if you'd like to see the uncut version, the unedited version of this thing, he says, meet me at CBS and I'll let you watch it. We went and watched the thing. And I didn't realize what a great difference it was until you're sitting watching the thing. And that's when it really was apparent, hey, something is wrong here. 2 things I noticed that stood out in watching Arnold. He looked thin, okay, but he also looked unbelievably nervous. he was not confident. He's always been noted for being very, very confident in charts. He was not. Even with all the judges in his pocket, he was still unsure of how the crowd was going to react, and they did react quite negatively when they announced the results of the contest.
CBS's relationship with the Olympia show disappeared. The decision also hurt competitor relations. Immediately after the contest, Mintzer retired from bodybuilding. Zane and co. withdrew from smaller competitions in the immediate aftermath. And Dickerson was heralded by many as the real champion. When Ben Weider introduced Dickerson at a training seminar months after the contest, he referred to him as the man who should have won the Olympia.
The Australian Association presented me with the winner's trophy. They came over on Qantas Airlines and met me at Gold's Gym and said, Chris Dickerson, Mr. Olympia 1980. Never talked about that because I respect Arnold and he was the official Mr. Olympia.
Of the 7 Olympia judges, 4 were arguably predisposed towards Arnold, owing largely to personal considerations. Some, like former bodybuilder Reg Park, were Arnold's close friends. Others, like Albert Buzik, helped Arnold break into American bodybuilding in the 1960s. Even the contest organizer, Paul Graham, was Arnold's close friend.
And I get sick and tired of hearing people bring up the idea that, well, bodybuilding is subjective. So who are you to say that contests are fixed? That is not true. Anything that exists in reality can be viewed, judged objectively. There are objective criteria for judging bodybuilders. It's interesting, at the 1980 Olympia, the only people who saw Arnold as the winner were the 7 judges and his closest friends. None of the other competitors saw him as the winner. None of the audience, or very few, only those that were his friends.
This put others at a disadvantage, including Chris Dickerson, whose own mentor, Bill Pearl, had excused himself from judging owing to his friendship with Chris. John Fair suggests that Arnold's charisma likely played a significant role in his 1980 victory. This same charisma also explains why few people question his 7 Mr. Olympia titles. However, a combination of his legacy, favorable judging policies, and experience contributed to his controversial win in 1980. It remains one of the most debated and contested victories in bodybuilding history. In 1982, Arnold returned to the spotlight with Conan the Barbarian, a film that marked a turning point in his career. After a year spent refining his English, mastering swordsmanship, and training for the physically demanding role, Arnold headed to Yugoslavia and Spain for the 6-month shoot. Conan the Barbarian was a massive success, grossing over $200 million at the box office. It was followed by a sequel, Conan the Destroyer, solidifying Arnold's status as a rising star in Hollywood. Then, in 1984, Arnold starred in the film that would make him a global icon, The Terminator. The movie was a worldwide hit, and Arnold's portrayal of the relentless cyborg assassin earned him the title of International Star of the Year. From that moment on, Arnold became synonymous with blockbuster action films. In 1989, Arnold further cemented his legacy in bodybuilding by creating the Arnold Classic. This prestigious annual competition quickly became one of the most important events in the world of fitness and bodybuilding.
My whole life, I had this unusual talent that I could see things very clearly in front of me. If I can see it, then it must be achievable. The idea was to sculpt the body to your will, but it also can be used to shape your mind. To do the things that everyone calls impossible. And that gives you the will. And no doubt that you could make new visions, not only become a reality, but go beyond your dreams.